Halo 5 Guardians is a game that you're not supposed to like. It's a game that's entered that illustrious pantheon of games that are understood by everyone to be the bad one. A franchise killer if you're feeling dramatic, hot garbage if you're not. Even fans who aren't so heated will generally agree that Halo 5 is the worst of the series. Ugly, boring and confusing. To this day it's the butt of jokes in the Halo community. Something you notice when you're a critic is that oftentimes the things that you like are held against you more than the things that you dislike. Disliking something popular is bold, it shows contrarianism, it takes the perfect thing down a peg or two. Liking something unpopular does not work the same way. It's a sign of bad taste, and bad taste invalidates your views as a critic because if you like this bad thing, how can anyone take any of your other opinions seriously? So, it's with a heavy heart that I have to tell you that Halo 5 is one of my favourite games in the series. Yes, including the campaign. Especially the campaign. Alright, just let me try and explain myself, okay? Halo 5 is an intensely flawed game for reasons that go much deeper than any plot holes in the campaign or moments of mischaracterization. I can't really fault anyone who dislikes the game. Although I will fault the weirdo still hurling abuse at the writers all these years later. You guys need to learn when to let go of a grudge. I have always been a defender of this game. One of the first videos I made for this channel was me trying, and frankly, failing, to explain why I didn't hate this game like everyone else did. I can listen to everyone's problems with this game and agree and nod along that their observations are correct. I just fail to see them as problems. And I'm certainly not opposed to some good old-fashioned 343 bashing, the favourite pastime of every Halo YouTuber. I don't like Halo 4, and I think Halo Infinite is a hot mess, but I've never been able to find that vitriol for Halo 5. There's just so much boldness and creativity and ambition on display in this game. It's the only game in 343's run where I can actually hear their voice as a developer in the design. Unlike Halo 4, and especially Halo Infinite, Halo 5 takes so much risks. People say that it took too much risks, but I think the real pitfall of the campaign is that it doesn't take enough. It fundamentally changes the basic combat rhythms of Halo, it makes bizarre and counterintuitive story decisions, and it pivots away from the Master Chief as a focal point character. It breaks all of the rules that had been established for the series so far. In a certain sense, it was doomed to be controversial, regardless of whether these changes were good or bad, because as we all know, gamers love change. The game is also to this day mired by an extremely misleading marketing campaign that had people expecting a game that wasn't even remotely like the game they had actually made. It was a good marketing campaign for a different game, and I'm not really sure how that happens, but clearly some wires were crossed somewhere. There are plenty of completely valid reasons to dislike or even hate this game. I'm not trying to invalidate your opinions on it. I'm not even necessarily trying to convince you otherwise. I would just like to lay out my own interpretations, why no matter what anyone says or how people judge me for it, I find something really special in this game. Halo 5 picks up roughly a year after the events of Halo 4, but we don't start in the familiar shoes of Master Chief. Instead, Halo 5 begins by establishing an almost brand new team of Spartans who will be in the protagonist spot for the majority of the game. Like Halo 3, Halo 5 is built with co-op in mind, acknowledging a truth that's been true since the first game in the series, that Halo is more fun with friends. The entire campaign is built around a squad of 4, and even if you're not playing co-op, your teammates will always be around to help in a firefight. That's a fundamental change to the balance of the entire game, but we'll get to that in a bit. If you're playing co-op, then you get to choose which team member you'd like to play, but by default player 1 will fill the shoes of Spartan Jameson Locke, a former spy with a shady past and the face of Luke Cage. Not the voice of Luke Cage, but the face of Luke Cage. He commands Fireteam Osiris, including Olympia Vale, a hot-headed scientist type, Holly Tanaka, a down-to-earth colony kid, and Edward Buck, returning from ODST, now promoted to a Spartan as the team's old veteran. The team immediately strikes a very different figure to the Chief. They're all a lot more human than he is, cracking jokes about who'll be paying for shrinks when the mission is over. And they're also given one of the coolest intro cinematics in the series, establishing both the team's combat prowess and the wildly different way that Spartans move in this game. Previously a pretty useless and terrible armor ability in Halo 4, a set of thruster packs have been introduced as a core part of the movement mechanics in Halo 5, making Spartans much more agile and manoeuvrable, which Osiris puts to full use in this flashy intro charging down the mountain through an army of Covenant. So, we've not even gotten to the gameplay yet, and we're already completely saturated in controversial changes. Halo 5 is the only game in the series to open with such an extended action sequence like this. It's easily the biggest and most bombastic opening in the series, and that bombast and pacing is going to be kept up for the entire game. Halo 5 is actually one of the longer campaigns in the series, but it moves at a breakneck speed from almost start to finish. With all the changes and the speed everything is thrown at you, it can be overwhelming, especially on your first playthrough, and most people will only play through a campaign once, especially if they didn't like it very much. Osiris' mission is a clue as to how to view the game, and Osiris in particular, as it's not a mission that follows up on Halo 4 directly, but instead resolves a plot thread left dangling at the end of Halo 4's Spartan Ops. The now one-armed Dr. Halsey working alongside the new Covenant leader Jul Mdama. While Osiris themselves are not characters from Spartan Ops, their team dynamics and the fact that they are a team of Spartan 4s working for Captain Lasky and Sarah Palmer are clearly a continuation of the storytelling being done with Spartan Ops. The Janus key is nowhere to be seen, as that particular plot thread was already resolved in a run of comic books between games. Get used to hearing that, by the way. But the whole thing clips into sharper focus when you see that in the concept art for the game, Osiris included Spartan Thorn from Spartan Ops instead of Buck. A choice that would have made much more sense, but apparently a scheduling conflict led to the game getting Buck instead. Halo 5 also includes a sequel to Halo 4's base campaign, but we're not quite there yet. Since we finally slid down the mountain and entered gameplay, let's talk about that instead. Halo 4 was built on the same engine as Halo Reach, and so played almost identically. Halo 5 was built on a new engine for a new console generation, and as a result, it's probably the most modern feeling Halo game, including Halo Infinite, which is a deliberate regression from a lot of the modern touches that Halo 5 implemented. The thruster packs are used for more than just flashy cutscenes. There's a whole host of uses for them across all aspects of gameplay. They can be used to make quick evasive movements, but they can also be used to hover in place for a time if you jump up and zoom in. Because for the first time in the series, aim down sights is a standard feature for every gun. Thrusters can also be used while sprinting to perform a charge attack that functions as a stronger melee attack and can also be used to knock down certain breakable walls to open up hidden paths or secrets. And they can also be used to perform a ground pound attack if you're high enough up in the air. It is a huge host of extra mechanics and new options added to your basic mobility from previous entries in the series and kind of fundamentally changes the feel of the game. Before launch, there was some concern that these would make the game more akin to a movement shooter like Titanfall, and around the same time Call of Duty was experimenting with similar enhancements, but honestly I think Halo 5 strikes a good balance. The clear influence isn't Titanfall's crazy wall-running antics, but Iron Man. You're not necessarily supposed to feel agile, but like a brick with some jet boosters on it. The thrusters have a heaviness to them that feels very in line with the idea of Spartan armor being this big, bulky suit. It does give combat a much faster and more frantic pace than any other game in the series, a feeling enhanced by some of the major changes to the combat. Because every encounter is balanced for 4 players, or at least 1 player and 3 moderately strong squad mates, the game throws way more enemies at you in much bigger arenas. The arenas are designed with a lot of vertical layers to accommodate the increased movement that the thrusters give you, as well as another modern touch, the ability to climb up short ledges. However, the trade-off is that your health and shields are significantly weaker than any previous entry. That's because death isn't the end in Halo 5, there's a revive mechanic for when a team member goes down to get them back into the fight, with a quick burst of overshields to ensure both of you survive. Even in single player, your AI squad members can still revive you, so this rebalance means that you're punished harder for silly mistakes, but also that those mistakes aren't necessarily fatal. And with 3 other targets on the battlefield, it's easy to see why this rebalance was made. The game wants you to feel somewhat dependent on your teammates, and the revival mechanic is a clear way to do that, even if it does occasionally lead to one-hit kills on you which feel distinctly unfair. Halo 5 still feels like Halo, even with all these changes. The balance of enemies remains mostly the same, although the Prometheans have been reworked to make them a little more interesting and diverse to fight against. There's still the same mix of on-foot and vehicle-based combat as all the previous games, but with a lot of modern enhancements that give the game a very different pace to any other game in the series. It's the question of if Halo should have added these modern touches that's the real sticking point. As franchises age, this is a question that all of them have to tackle eventually. Do you adapt with the times, or do you stick with the rhythms that people are familiar and comfortable with? One choice isn't necessarily better than another, although change is always going to be met with some controversy by its nature, and stagnation has its own set of risks. Halo 5 chooses to adapt. Like Halo 4's loadouts, the thrusters and all of this rebalancing are a grand experiment for the series, trying something different to see what sticks. Only this time, I think it actually works. I enjoy playing Halo 5 significantly more than I ever did Halo 4 because of the diversity these additions add to combat. And like any Halo game, despite how the campaign might have been received, it's the gunplay and the multiplayer that truly matter to the game's success and legacy. Halo 5's multiplayer is pretty cleanly split into two halves. There's the classic Halo-style arena battles where everyone starts on even footing and scavenges weapons from around the map. And then there's Warzone, a new massive 24-player mod that involves loadouts, AI enemies, and very long matches. The return to a more classic-feeling arena mode for Halo feels right. Even with the addition of the thrusters, the arena experience of Halo 5 is more classic than even Halo Reach, which had its armor abilities. Halo 5 is a fun game to play. This time it's everything else surrounding the multiplayer that's the issue, and it all starts with a system called REQ, short for Requisitions. One of the most controversial changes before launch was the reveal that Halo 5 actually massively trims down your customization options from Halo 4. Instead of having all your armor customizable as separate pieces, you can only choose a helmet and an armor set. Halo 5 actually includes hundreds of options within these limitations if you're only looking at the number of items, but what it doesn't have is the same number of combinations as the other games. That's actually a change I'm not that bothered with. It's the reasons behind the change that are the problem. In Halo 3 you unlocked armor customization with achievements, in Halo Reach they were purchased using in-game currency earned from matches, and in Halo 4 they were unlocked by leveling up and completing certain challenges. Here in Halo 5, the only way to unlock any customization options, bar a few minor exceptions, is random loot boxes. Going forward in Halo from this point, we can see whatever the trends are at the time when it comes to aggressive monetization. And here in 2015, the fad was loot boxes. So here we have the REQ card system. REQ packs come in 3 tiers, bronze, silver and gold, and every customization item has a rating tied to it, a generic colour coding system that's standard game design language. So you can only get the ultra rare and legendary items in gold REQ packs. You can buy REQ packs with in-game currency similar to Halo Reach, but it's going to take time. Assuming you're regularly winning and doing well, it's going to take around 7 matches minimum to get 1 gold REQ pack. That's just over an hour of play between card packs. Gold REQ packs contain around 14 or 15 things, but here's the twist. Only 2 of those are guaranteed to be permanent unlocks. The rest are going to be REQ cards, which are single-use items that can be used in Warzone to redeem powerful weapons and vehicles. You can sell these single-use cards if you want, and you'll get a pittance for them, but mainly I think that's just to encourage players to play Warzone, otherwise all these cards they get are completely pointless. Also, just because you can only get legendary and ultra-rare items in gold packs doesn't mean that you only get ultra rare and legendary items in a gold REQ pack. You can still get plenty of greens in a gold REQ pack. And there's also permanent unlocks for Warzone that you can't really count as customization. Warzone includes a bunch of weapon attachments and perks and other stuff you can choose for free as part of the match, but you need to unlock them in REQ packs first, obviously. So, if there's a piece of armor you really want, there is absolutely nothing you can do to guarantee you will get it. It could take you actual years of playing to end up with the armor you want, because along with all the different sets, every paint job for those sets is counted as a separate item to unlock separately. Of course, you could drastically increase your chances and speed things up dramatically by forking over a bit of cash. Just $3 for a gold pack. And hey, if you buy a bigger bundle, then you get more bang for your buck. This is, of course, the whole point of the entire system. It's a massive, unfun inconvenience designed exclusively to break your will and get you to spend money. There is a reason that certain countries started classifying loot boxes as gambling. These are the same psychological tricks a casino uses to take all your money. It's just that instead of money being the potential reward, it's the helmet Buck wears in the campaign. I think in terms of monetization and manipulation, Infinite is worse, but that by no means makes this game better in retrospect. The system completely devalues what's fun and interesting about customization in the first place. Someone's armor isn't a showcase of their personality or creativity, it's a showcase of luck and nothing more. Even if you pump ridiculous amounts of money into it, which some people have, it's still just luck that gives you the armor you want. So with all that said, is Warzone itself actually any good? Yes, it actually is. That's what makes this game so frustrating. Warzone is a very weird and kind of complicated game mode at first, with a lot of different systems going on. But once you get into it, you realise that essentially they've combined Battlefield with a MOBA, and the results are quite compelling. Each map has control points, and when one team controls all of them, it exposes the other team's core, which you can destroy to win. But you can also win by reaching 1,000 points, and points are rewarded for holding and controlling zones, killing enemies, but more importantly killing special AI bosses that spawn in around the map. These are massive bullet sponge enemies designed to be taken down by teams, but you get a massive point boost for taking them down. Each match has a simple level up system like a MOBA where as you play the match you'll gradually get access to better weapons and vehicles, which give the entire match a great sense of escalation. Everyone starts pelting each other with assault rifles, but by the end you're engaging in tank battles and rocket fights. Here the rec system actually makes sense because it allows for power weapons to enter the field without it becoming completely overwhelming. Some people won't use them, or other people will only use them when they think they need them, and there's a cooldown attached to them so you can't keep respawning with a sniper rifle and become completely unstoppable. If rec packs were exclusive to just this game mode, then I think I would have much less of a problem with the entire system. That's actually exactly what Halo Wars 2 does. It has a loot box system, but only for one specific game mode, and it's not even the main mode of the game. It's throwing the customization into the mix that drags the whole thing down. Even if they had added a customization only pack for more credits, it would have made a drastic difference to the game. Unlike Halo Infinite, this was already a full price game, and having this system on top of that is really gross. The most common thing I hear about this game these days is, yeah, the campaign was shite, but the multiplayer was pretty good. And well, yes, the game is fun to play. The sense of progression and freedom within the system is worse than any of the games because of this sole reliance on loot boxes to provide that sense of progression. Personally, I've always been more interested in campaigns. I play a lot of Halo multiplayer, but it's second screen content at best. That's how I'm able to overlook such a drastic flaw in the game anyway. I prefer a story that I can get invested in, something that demands my full attention. And whether you like it or not, Halo 5 demands your full attention. The second mission introduces the second half of the campaign, although that's a little misleading. Like Halo 2, Halo 5 jumps between its two teams of Spartans, but the split is not even. Osiris are very much the main characters of the game, while Master Chief and Blue Team only get about a quarter of the missions. Their missions are generally longer, which mitigates that some, but not enough clearly, because a lot of fans got very mad about the game sidelining Master Chief. I've always found this to be a very strange critique of the game. Just because he isn't in the player spot the entire time doesn't mean he's not important or that the game still isn't about him. Yet this criticism was so severe that one of the first things the marketing team did for Halo Infinite was assure fans that Master Chief would be back in the player one spot, don't worry. I like Master Chief just fine. I don't love him, and never in a million years would I consider him to be one of the best video game characters of all time. But I like him. He gets the job done for what a Halo protagonist needs to do. Yet even since Halo 2, it's been clear that there are more interesting characters in this universe to tell stories around than him. And the continued focus on Master Chief as we go further and further into the franchise is one of the clear signs of the franchise's stagnation. That it can't move away from these same ideas and story beats it's been telling since Halo 1. Halo 4 at least tried to do something creatively interesting with the Chief, and despite my many problems with the game, it mostly succeeded at that. Even if Halo 5 features him less, this is a clear continuation of the ideas started in that game. In fact, the lack of focus is an explicit part of the story. Following Cortana's apparent death, the Chief has receded, throwing himself into mission after mission, leaning into being more machine than man. It's not the healthy thing for him to do, but he's depressed. It's a logical follow-on from where he was at the end of Halo 4, and that detachment from the world is also meant to be felt by the player. The first mission with Chief isn't important at all, it's all about establishing this mood and tone for this side of the story. The mission is just to investigate and then scuttle an old research station. It would work a lot better if he was alone, but that gets into what's probably my biggest issue with the entire story, the existence of Blue Team. Blue Team are Master Chief's old Spartan squad, Fred, Kelly and Linda, all Spartan 2s like him. They're some of the most important characters of the Halo novels, but this is their first appearance or even mention in any of the games. They are, without a doubt, the most boring characters in the game. They're honestly more like extensions of Master Chief than actual people with their own motivations or personalities of their own, and they exist in the game purely to facilitate 4-player co-op during Master Chief's portion of the story. A story that really should be about the Chief on his own for reasons that will become clear. This is not true of Osiris. Each of them has a narrative role in the game, at least at some point, like Tanaka being there to explain things about the colony they visit later, or Vale being there to translate all of the elite language that they encounter on San Helios. Blue Team only exists in the peripheral to Chief. To go, yes Chief, and what do you want to do Chief? It's detrimental to them as characters and to Chief's arc in the game, since it works completely against the idea of him being alone to have this family of loyal and friendly brothers and sisters by his side the entire time. The way that Blue Team is shoehorned into this game is the clearest sign to me that Master Chief wasn't meant to be playable at all in the first draft of the game. I don't know that for sure, obviously, but there is a lot about this game that makes way more sense if Master Chief isn't in the player 1 spot at all. At some point in the production, 343 got cold feet and added Master Chief back in, which, given the backlash to even his reduced role in this game, was clearly the correct decision. And I even think Chief's story contains some of the best moments in the campaign, so it's not a total loss. It's more just a bad omen for things to come. But we'll get to that later. During the mission, Chief has a strange and cryptic vision of Cortana telling him to come to a place called Meridian, and after destroying the station, Chief and his team disobey orders to return to base and instead follow Cortana's instructions. This is the driving force of the rest of the campaign, and, I think, the reason for all of the misleading marketing leading up to the game's release. Because the ultimate reveal of the game is that Cortana is the villain. 343 didn't want to spoil this before the game came out, despite it making up the vast majority of the campaign, so instead all of the marketing focused on the Master Chief going rogue aspect of the story, an aspect which is ultimately not that consequential at all. I have no defense for this. It was a really stupid decision to focus so much of the game's marketing and even the box art of the game on hyping up a rivalry between Chief and Locke that simply does not matter at all to what the game is actually about. Cortana's villainous return isn't a big enough surprise to warrant such a subversion. All it did was shoot themselves in the foot by setting up expectations for a game that they hadn't made. After the prologue missions, you can pretty cleanly split the game into 3 acts, and the first act is a mystery. But it's not a mystery about the Chief's motivations, it's about Cortana's motivations. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why they didn't just make that the focus of the marketing instead. Locke and Osiris are assigned to bring in Blue Team as part of this mission, which culminates in a fight between Chief and Locke. But after Act 1, the rivalry is over, and Osiris and Blue Team are pretty much on the same page about this stop Cortana situation. Because all of this is established so early in the story, it would be basically impossible to include Cortana in the marketing without the reveal that she was the villain. But again, that sounds like a good enough hook for the marketing anyway, so I have no explanation for why they did it this way. Halo 5's story is often labelled as very confusing, but it's actually pretty simple once you lay it out. Cortana is activating ancient Forerunner bird robots, called Guardians, with which she plans to seize control of the galaxy and rule as a benevolent AI overlord. It's not that complicated. It's just the game's hectic pace, especially during exposition cutscenes which have a real people talking over each other problem that can make it hard to follow on your first time through. Unlike Halo 4's tight character focus, Halo 5 is saturated in names and places and characters. It's a galaxy-hopping adventure, which to my mind is one of the best things about it, but I can understand why others would get frustrated by the pace at which the game throws things at you. When you get over the hurdle of the false marketing and the fast pacing, I think Halo 5 has one of the most depthful and interesting stories in the entire series. Act 1 of the story takes place on Meridian. A lot of important stuff happens here, but because this is the mystery chapter, it's unclear what exactly that is on your first time through. That doesn't matter to me though, because Meridian is a fascinating setting all on its own. It was a pre-war human colony that was glassed by the Covenant, leaving the surface of the planet a strange, jagged black glass and floating magma. A new group of settlers have come back here post-war to dig beneath the glass and make the planet livable again. The colony is outside of UNSC jurisdiction and is instead run by a private corporation. Normally this kind of grey, dead landscape doesn't appeal to me, but there's something about the bleakness of Meridian that really captures the imagination. It's such a strange and alien-looking landscape, with these new human structures awkwardly trying to make this clearly dead place livable again. Halo 5 uses the same art style as Halo 4, but it does much better by it than Halo 4 did. Part of that is the next-gen glossy sheen over everything, but the game's use of colour is much bolder and more interesting. The dead landscape is perfectly contrasted by the bright orange tank the game gives you to create this really odd, almost inverted image look to the segment. Spartan armour has been reworked slightly too, most noticeable on the Chief himself. I still don't love the design, but with bolder colours and slightly simplified textures, it comes together better and gives the game a kind of action figure look, which isn't incompatible with Halo's vibe. Probably the strangest aspect of the design is the Covenant. Even more so than Halo 4, they lean into these very weird and abstract organic shapes, which starts to make all of their weapons and vehicles look like weird sea creatures of some variety. I don't hate the design per se, but it is a bizarre look to be sure, and one I'm not surprised they pulled back from. I think the game looks good. Not great, but good. I still hate the distracting immersive UI elements, but at the very least I appreciate how each character has a unique UI that matches their helmet. It's the environmental design that shines this time, and Halo 5 is built to accommodate that environmental curiosity. It might just be because Buck is around, but there is some ODST DNA in this game when it comes to the level design. It has that same casual world building and the details that ODST had. There's even several levels without combat at all, where you're encouraged to just walk around and explore. There's a lot of minor audio logs to be found in the environment that here on Meridian mostly give context and motivation as to why the colonists are trying to rebuild here, but more importantly to me, exploring can sometimes trigger the characters to chime in on things and voice their thoughts, which might be some of the most obscure dialogue in the whole game because the game never makes this obvious.
Seen others, of course, but a glassed world really only looks like one thing to these eyes. Manab. Home. Whole world got glassed. Some say it was lucky to survive, but those folks didn't scratch out a living as the sky turned black and the temperatures dropped. What do we know about the experiments they were doing here?
We don't. And we don't ask.
But I'd keep your helmet on tight just the same.
This one says, Chi no I Kyoise Gyonju. Life, death. Forever vigilant. Interesting. There's a question here, too. Who is entitled to this honor?
No one is entitled to honor. You earn it.
You're starting to understand Sangheli culture.
No, I just don't believe anyone is entitled to anything.
I'm kind of conflicted on this. On the one hand, I genuinely love it. I love that your environmental curiosity is rewarded with these little glimpses into the characters and how we get to hear their interpretations of the things you're seeing. On the other hand, because Halo has never done this before and the game never makes it obvious that this is a thing, most people blast through the campaign without ever looking around and miss some of the best moments of characterization. The kind of stuff that the high pace of the main story and cutscenes just doesn't have time for. These rewards for exploration are even incorporated into progress through the level. For example, early on in Meridian, there's a locked gate that will only open when all of the enemies in the area are defeated. If you go looking, you can find the controls for the automated turrets and get them online to help in the fight. Or, if you're in a rush, you can get up high and hit the gate's generator with a sniper round to skip the firefight. If you do that though, the local governor is going to be extra pissed with you. Every level is full of extra details like this, multiple solutions to getting through a particular area. As is the story of the game itself, it's fast-paced but incredibly dense with details. The UNSC are not welcome on Meridian, and the man in charge, Governor Sloan, is more than a bit bristly at the idea of having Spartans on his planet, but a seemingly random Promethean attack forces him to play nice with your investigation. Sloan is one of the most important characters of this act, but not of the game. Each act of the game shifts not only settings, but casts of characters as well. I really like the structure because of how it lets each act's world building take centre stage. By the end of Act 1, you have a full grasp on Meridian, its landscape, its culture, its history, and its politics, in a way that you've never had with a previous location in the series. Aside from maybe New Mombasa in ODST. The first of several big reveals is that Sloan isn't a man at all. He's an AI who, like Cortana in Halo 4, is in the process of rampancy. This is important because through Sloan's story we get a microcosm of Cortana's plan across the whole galaxy. Halo 5 leans into the fact that the relationship between humans and AI in the Halo universe is kind of messed up. While we're used to the perspective of Chief, who views Cortana as a person and a friend, this is not the universal view of AIs in Halo. They're generally viewed as tools to be used and discarded.
Master Chief worked with Cortana for a while, right?
Yes, Chief considered her a close friend.
It's unusual for anyone to anthropomorphize an AI so deeply as to consider them a friend.
Unusual. but not unheard of.
Here on Meridian, with an AI governor, that attitude towards AI can now be seen as a policy issue. The UNSC don't consider AIs to be people, but here on the frontier they don't have such ideas and are happy to put their trust in an AI even in a degraded state.
I don't get the guys who spend all day worrying about Governor Sloan. He can't deny he does a hell of a job. I'm sure he does that thing where he talks with two voices sometimes, but most folk do the same thing, just aren't courteous enough to do it out loud. It doesn't bother me. I know he's got Meridian's best interests at heart.
It's only complicated by the fact that on some level the UNSC are correct. AIs aren't people. They are so much more than just people. The Promethean attack is a side effect of Cortana's real goal on Meridian, to activate a dormant guardian there with Chief and the team hitching a ride on. This is when Locke and the Chief have their big punch-up. This scene seems to really annoy some people in an anime power level sort of way. The fact that the fight is even slightly fair at all is nonsense to them because Master Chief is bigger and stronger and more experienced. Spartan 2s are supposed to be way stronger than puny little Spartan 4s. This bothers me for several reasons. Firstly, Master Chief does win the fight. Yes, Locke gets a good hit in there, but Chief still wins pretty handily. Secondly, the idea that Locke doesn't even stand a chance would make Chief less interesting as a character. A hero who has the potential to lose is much more interesting than a hero that's completely unstoppable. This attitude towards Chief is one of the primary reasons for swapping perspective to Osiris. They don't have this reputation as ultra unstoppable badasses. They're fallible, and this fight even showcases that. People also say that this fight is dumb and pointless, but I even disagree on that. The Chief only starts fighting when Locke suggests that Cortana isn't his concern anymore, and both the audience and the Chief know what Locke means by that. But Locke is also right to take that attitude. Cortana is a threat, and the Chief is personally and emotionally compromised when it comes to her. It's a bad idea to put him in the same room with new sinister Cortana, but at the same time, Chief is correct in his impulse to try and protect and redeem one of his oldest friends. And that's what the best hero versus hero fights are built on. Two correct but fundamentally opposed ideas. The bit of character I love in this fight is right at the end when Locke is clearly lost and his last desperate act is to pull a gun. Locke is generally quite likeable and personable, if very mission focused, but here in this last ditch effort he shows his true colours, when he has absolutely zero hesitation about shooting humanity's biggest hero. I think the real problem with this scene is that Osiris never takes a minute to reflect on it and comment on the fact that Locke pulled a gun in the end, because the fact that it's never mentioned again robs it of a lot of the impact such a pivotal character moment actually shows. But the next mission is a breakneck escape sequence that doesn't have a lot of time for casual chat like that. The real revelation that comes out is that Sloan knew what was happening the whole time. He made a deal with Cortana days ago, and his motivations for allying with her are perfectly in keeping with everything we already knew about him. Sloan is not a sinister figure. He's gruff, but he has a genuine care for his constituents, and it's that care that drives him to join up with the bad guys. That and the fact that Cortana has discovered the cure for rampancy and is willing to share it with any AI that joins up with her. Cortana does not want to rule the galaxy through fear. She wants to rule it through love. And that is such a compelling angle for a villain. Blue Team's next mission is mostly about answering the obvious questions like how Cortana is still alive after the end of Halo 4, as well as establishing her contentious relationship with the ancient Forerunner AI Warden Eternal. But let's jump ahead now and actually explain what's going on with Cortana, because the full picture of what's going on with her only really becomes clear right at the end of the game. At the end of Halo 4, the Didact ship was pulled through slipspace to a Forerunner planet called Genesis, where Cortana gained access to something called the Domain, a galaxy-spanning Forerunner network for AIs that cures her of her rampancy. This essentially makes her like AIs in other fictional universes, immortal and ageless. And as she says herself, it allows for long-term planning. Instead of thinking in days and weeks, she now thinks in periods of hundreds and thousands of years. That tweak in her thinking, just spans of times, is what leads to her villainous turn. Cortana wishes to take up the mantle of responsibility, the concept that the Didact in Halo 4 so stubbornly clung on to. The divine obligation to protect and nurture the galaxy, although this game adds that the Forerunners enforce that piece with the Guardians. Cortana is much smarter than any living creature and now much more powerful, so her plan is pretty simple. If everyone just does exactly what I say forever, then everything will be perfect. This isn't slavery or oppression, it's a gift. Turn over your thinking to your AI overlords and they'll take care of the rest. Sure, some outcasts like Fireteam Osiris will resist and fight back, but that's a short-term problem. Once all resistance has been crushed, the galaxy will know peace forever. I love this because it's so perfectly in line with Cortana's motivations across the entire series. The same qualities that make her such a good companion, stubbornness, protectiveness, and intelligence, just given a massively expanded scope, can suddenly take on sinister qualities. Viewed as a villain origin story, Halo 4 becomes so much more interesting in retrospect. When she says it's a gift, she's not really talking about individuals, she's looking at humanity as a species. They're more akin to animals than to parity with her, and she views them that way, as beloved pets. Sometimes pets require discipline, but that doesn't mean you don't love them anymore. A dictator who doesn't rule through fear or might or genocidal hatred, but through condescending love? That's such a compelling hook for a villain. Like Sloane, hundreds of AIs from across the galaxy join her, persuaded by the same logic. They're not looking for revenge, they genuinely think this is what's best for everyone. And on the time frame of a machine, that might be correct, but it means giving up freedom, choice, and personhood, and that's not something most people living today would be willing to do. Nor should they. When people say that Halo 5 is a pivot from Halo 4 or somehow resets the story told there, I honestly don't know what they're talking about. It doesn't bring the didact back, sure, but the themes and concepts established in Halo 4 are all perfectly continued from what Halo 4 set up. The themes of man versus machine, the relationship between Cortana and Chief along with their inverted natures, and the mantle of responsibility. The true difference between man and machine isn't emotion after all, it's time. Time is incredibly important to us living creatures because we all know that we've only got a limited amount of it. We have to make the most of the time we get. A machine doesn't have such limitations, and that change in perspective changes the value of life in the first place. Cortana isn't emotionless. Her entire plan is driven by emotion, by caring, by love. It's just that when you look at things in the span of thousands of years, the plight of a single individual is minuscule to the grand plan. You could say that it retcons Cortana's death at the end of Halo 4, but I never really believed she was dead in the first place. That final scene is deliberately vague about it. Cortana is my favourite villain in the series, and the main reason why Halo Infinite was quite such a disappointment to me. As much as I love Halo 5, it's a middle chapter establishing the motivations and stakes for the trilogy's big bad guy that the final game would then be about taking down. That's obviously not what happened. Making Cortana into the ultimate villain is obviously an extremely risky and controversial thing to do, probably the biggest risk in the game. Redemption arcs are pretty common. Fallen heroes, especially ones as well established as Cortana, are much more rare because you risk pissing a lot of people off, which it did. Hilariously, just a year before this, Microsoft made Cortana into their own version of Siri on all of their devices, which when she starts to enslave humanity in the next game is just quite unfortunate for them. If you're against this story beat on the face of it, then that's perfectly understandable. Having one of your favourite characters turn into a monster is a hard story beat to face. But I think it's harsh to say that it's bad writing just because you disagree with the choice. And personally, it's the fact that we know Cortana so well that makes her heel turn so compelling to me. Osiris gets a new mission, and the marketing campaign for the game officially stops mattering at all as the mission shifts from stopping Master Chief to helping him. But that involves hitching a ride on another Guardian to get to Genesis, and Dr. Halsey happens to have found one on the elite homeworld of Sanghelios. Thus, the stage is set for Act 2. Like the first act, this means a new setting, a new cast of supporting characters, and a new tone. Sanghelios is undergoing a civil war between Jul 'Mdama's Dama's now leaderless faction of Covenant and the Arbiter's faction, the Swords of Sanghelios. The Arbiter takes on the Sloane role for this chapter, though there are other important characters as well. Halsey and Sarah Palmer tag along for this covert mission, and you'll be getting help from one of the Arbiter's top lieutenants. Maquis, the first female elite we've met in the entire series. And just like Meridian, there's plenty of opportunities to take your time and soak in the surroundings and culture of the elites. Most of the missions take place in their temples and ruins, which predate the Covenant, back when they were just a single species on a single planet, a race of warriors and honour. Like with Meridian, there's a great use of colour, the Covenant weapons and vehicles with their strange organic shapes contrasted against the ancient desert ruins and statues to showcase just how old these ruins must be in comparison to the technological level the elites are at now. Vale, being the Sangheli expert, is able to translate things for you and give you a broader understanding of the things you're seeing, along with being more than a little bit giddy about the opportunity.
Vale, what are these murals?
Those murals depict a pre-Covenant Sangheili burial ceremony. You guys, we're the first humans to see these.
The Guardian is hidden underneath the Covenant's capital city, Sunayon, so it necessarily involves helping the Arbiter win his war. It's an action-packed chapter with some of the best and most memorable set pieces in the franchise, like taking down the Kraken, a massive and weird Covenant air vehicle, or storming Sunayon, which is built over an ocean like a strange purple Camino from Star Wars. Killing off the leader of the Covenant in the first mission of the game does seem like a strange choice, but I think it makes their portrayal in this act so much more interesting. They're clearly on their last legs. Listening through the audio logs here is especially interesting with how different people react. Nobody is willing to step up and become the new figurehead, so they just lash out. Some people quietly leave, others are just looking for a glorious death in battle. While the Covenant did end in Halo 3, this feels even more conclusive. They're going out with a whimper instead of a bang, just a few zealots who were too loyal to give up no matter what happens. The Arbiter himself is very much a side character, a step below what even the Chief gets in this game. But for the story being told, that's perfectly fine, and with Keith David back, he steals every scene he's a part of.
Oni, out of the shadows. The spies announce themselves now, Agent Locke.
I'm a Spartan now, sir.
I know who you are. You were an agent when you volunteered to execute me.
You can argue from a broad strokes perspective that the Guardian could have been on any planet. It didn't have to be Sanghelios, and the Elite Civil War doesn't have much to do with the overall plot, which is true. But I don't see the harm in taking some time to explore the history and culture of one of the most important alien races in the franchise. The Guardian can be anywhere, but it has to be somewhere, so you may as well pick an interesting place for it to be. It's a common criticism, I feel like I've been saying that a lot this video, it's a common criticism that Osiris doesn't really do anything in this game that contributes to the main plot until right at the end. And if you're looking at purely just plot critical events, this is true. Nothing they do on Meridian stops or hinders Cortana in any way, nor does anything they do on Sanghelios. It's only in the last act when they're actually doing something that is directly relevant to the actual plot of the game. This is why the structure of the game is so important to keep in mind. Things click into place a lot better when instead of viewing Halo 5 like a movie, you view it like a limited series. Each episode of the show is self-contained but builds up to an overall narrative. It's a different structure to the previous games, which generally tell a more focused singular story, but I don't think that makes it a worse structure. The Civil War plot doesn't have much to do with the Cortana plot, but that doesn't mean it's not important. The end of the Covenant is a galaxy-shaking event all on its own. It's just the finale of the episode, not the finale of the season. The Osiris campaign being a sequel to Sparanops isn't just a matter of characters, but a matter of story structure as well. Of course, the biggest argument is just that people think Osiris is boring, and this has always been the argument I've had the hardest time arguing against. Not because I agree, but because it's so inherently subjective. I like Osiris, I enjoy their banter and think they have a good mix of personalities that complement each other well. They maybe don't have the same drama as the Chief, but I'm fine with that. They feel like much more modern protagonists than the Chief for a much more modern game. If you don't feel the same way about them, there's pretty much nothing I can say that will convince you otherwise. I'm clearly in the minority given how Osiris is treated by the next game. I gather they weren't all that popular, which I think is a shame. Nostalgia has been a running thread throughout this series, and here I think is where that nostalgia turns truly poisonous. Because the people who played Halo as a kid have turned Master Chief into a stronger character than he ever actually was. In the quote I showed earlier from Frank O'Connor, he talks about how people have filled in gaps in the character that were left deliberately open, and that's absolutely true. The way people talk about Master Chief is in some ways completely disconnected from who Master Chief actually was in the first 3 games. It's really not until Halo 4 that an actual personality was cemented for the character beyond being a badass. Osiris are fine characters, and this game could be a great foundation for them to go on to bigger and bolder stories, but they can't ever compete with the nostalgic idea of Master Chief, who our flawed human memories make into the bestest protagonist ever. When in reality, Master Chief in the original trilogy doesn't have a third of the character or personality that any member of Osiris does. And I don't mean that to insult the Chief. I mean, first of all, he's not real. But more importantly, he wasn't supposed to be a strong character in the trilogy. He was supposed to be a vessel for the player. to look cool and sound cool and shoot the aliens. Over the years, that kind of protagonist writing has gotten out of fashion. Osiris, and even the Chief himself at this point, are not written this way. Locke is a shady former government agent with the face of Mike Coulter. You're never supposed to view him as a vessel, but just as a character that you happen to be controlling. The legendary ending of Halo 4 made that idea explicit by showing the Chief's eyes at the end. Maybe it's just projection, but when I read that Frank O'Connor quote, I feel a bit of resentment in there. The ownership that some Halo fans feel over Master Chief must be so creatively stifling as a writer. The idea that 15 years into the franchise they can't move too far away from this one guy and the same character traits he's had since the beginning is a stranglehold for trying to tell new stories in this universe. It's a creative resentment that you can absolutely feel at work in Halo Infinite, but we'll get to that later. I've never been mad at the fact that the Chief has a reduced role in this game because it's always been clear to me that if the franchise was ever to have a future, then it would have to move away from him eventually. Halo is a vast and expansive sci-fi universe. There is room to tell other stories, and Halo 4 was already pushing the limit of what can be creatively achieved by locking themselves to the Chief's perspective. Osiris was the team that could save the franchise from creative stagnation, and they were widely rejected by Halo fans, and as a Halo fan myself, I find that to be very depressing. I really don't have a problem with Master Chief on the face of it. I already said I think he has some of the best moments in the game, but I also don't believe that Halo has to revolve around him. The franchise isn't called Master Chief, it's called Halo, and if we can have a Halo game without a Halo in it, we can certainly have one without Master Chief. Jumping on board the Guardian and hitching a ride to Genesis is the end of Act 2, and Act 3 begins with a bang by running down the side of the Guardian as it tries to shake you off, before landing on the planet and meeting this Act's side character, Exuberant Witness, the monitor of the Genesis installation. Exuberant is a fun character, sort of a less sinister version of Guilty Spark. She's been locked out of most of the systems by Cortana and the Warden, so most of what she can do now is open doors for you and try to help you reach the Chief in time to stop Cortana, with more and more Guardians appearing as you try and fight your way through. Because it's also the location of the finale, Genesis doesn't get quite the same world building as the other locations in the game do, but Exuberant Witness is a likeable enough character to let that slide, and besides, by this point in the series we're more than familiar with the landmarks and history of a Forerunner installation. Warden Eternal is yet another controversial aspect of the campaign, and one that I'm less inclined to defend. I think he's an interesting character that the game doesn't have enough time to flesh out fully. Likely another thing that would have been expanded more in whatever Halo 6 was originally supposed to be. He's the Lancelot to Cortana's Guinevere, the ever-loyal and protective knight, protective even to the point of protest from Cortana when he tries to protect her from the Chief. That's the part of his story I find interesting. His use as a recurring mini-boss is less compelling. He's mostly just a big bullet sponge because boss fights have never been Halo's strongest aspect. His contentious relationship with Cortana is compelling because he's absolutely correct, but that serves more to add characterization to Cortana rather to himself. The Chief doesn't tend to put a stop to Cortana's plans, but she's too infatuated with the Chief to see that. She thinks that if she can just talk to him face to face and explain it clearly, he'll be persuaded. The Warden knows better. It's probably the best scene in the game when they do have that meeting. Better if you pretend Blue Team aren't there just hanging out in the background. A deliberate inversion of the scene at the end of Halo 4. Cortana's new look is just fantastic, and the emotions of the scene come across just as strong as they did in Halo 4. Cortana doesn't kill Blue Team, instead she imprisons them in a cryptum like the one the Didact was trapped in Halo 4. When they wake up in 10,000 years, Chief will see that she was right about all of this, and all will be forgiven.
Stop. No, John. This is too important to stop. I just needed to know if I could still trust you. You'll be safe inside this cryptum until my work is done.
Cortana.
Goodbye, John.
This is also when the game most clearly contrasts Cortana's thoughts on the two teams. Cortana is all emotion and understanding when it comes to Chief, but cold and calculating and much more her old sarcastic self when dealing with Osiris. It's another of the many reasons Osiris is a necessary perspective on the story. They don't have years of history with Cortana, and so through the way Cortana treats them, we can get a clearer picture of what her peace really means for the galaxy. At the same time, she vastly underestimates Osiris, and in playing through the final mission you can understand why. On the scale of Guardians, you feel like insects compared to their size, scale, and power. Cortana views the Chief as a threat to her plans. She views Osiris as nothing more than pests, and that's exactly what gives them the upper hand in the end. You're not able to stop Cortana, but you are able to save Blue Team, and it's such a great finale to set up for the next game as the final cutscene shows the Guardians arriving at Earth to take control and the Infinity is forced to flee. The galaxy is under Cortana's control now, and we've never been more the underdogs. But the Chief is free, Cortana's one true weakness, and so a glimmer of hope remains.
Captain Lasky, distress calls, all channels.
It's Cortana?
Her and the other AIs are shutting down everything from Earth to the outer colonies.
Roland?
Found you. Hide and seek's over, Infinity.
Lieutenant Jet! Emergency slipspace now!
Responsibility for the galaxy shelters all, but only the created are its masters.
We're in the clear, Captain.
Can she track us?
No reason to think she can't.
Continue random jumps. Steer clear of major settlements.
We're just gonna run?
Only until we could find a way to fight.
As I'm sure the comments will point out, I've glossed over plenty of plot holes and other things like that in this video, and the reason for that is simple. I just don't care. I wish I could, honestly. This video would be so much easier to make if I hated this game like everyone else did, but I don't, and I'm not about to go looking for reasons to dislike it. Halo 5 is just kind of depressing in retrospect. It's the middle chapter of a trilogy that never really came together. Yes, it did technically get a sequel, but if you've played Halo Infinite, you know that it didn't really get a sequel. Halo 5 has its problems, but it's the only game they've made where I feel like 343 has fully taken creative control of the franchise into their own hands. I want to say it was ahead of its time, but I'm pretty sure even if it released today, the majority of Halo fans would still hate it. Halo 5 is kind of when I stopped being a Halo fan, at least as passionately as I was before then. Not because of the game, but because of how alienated I felt by the fandom's reaction to the game. This is not my favourite Halo game, but it's definitely up there and has been since I played it all those years ago. Explaining why has been one of the hardest videos I've ever written, because explaining why necessarily involves defending the game from years worth of criticism, both good and bad faith. I'm not trying to change your mind, but I hope at the very least I've been able to explain why I love this game, even when no one else does. I wish more people could see this game the way I do, but if I have to die alone on this hill, I guess there are worse ways to tank my reputation as a critic.
It took you long enough.
Thank you for watching, and a very special thank you to my wonderful patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to see your name up here or just support the things I do, then please consider signing up, it would mean a lot to me. And you could also help with a like, a comment, a share, and a subscribe. If you don't like and comment, how am I supposed to know that you actually liked the video? I believe Halo just ticked over to be the longest series I've ever made, so if you're looking for more Halo, I've got you covered up here. Or for something a little bit different, I just watched Fallout and it was very good, unlike other shows, which I can't seem to remember the name of right now. So if you want to have a little chat with me about that, then you can click down here.